Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarini Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, I'm grateful to be here amongst all of you today. And today I'll speak on this topic of Bhagavad Gita in modern psychology. And in the first half, I'll talk today about modern psychology and how the Bhagavad Gita is relevant in the light of whatever developments have happened in modern psychology. I've taken a broad pattern. And then later, I'll talk about in tomorrow's sessions and after tomorrow's session, how the Bhagavad Gita in many ways takes us in the same direction which modern psychology is taking us. It takes us much further ahead. Forget it. Okay. So, I'll start by about 2,000 years ago. One of the formative thinkers in Western thought systems was Aristotle. And he said that man is a rational animal. And that became the defining credo. That what is it that differentiates us human beings from animals? We human beings are actually physically weaker than many animals. We are physically slower than many animals. We physically don't have any formidable weapons like many animals have. So, yet we seem to be ruling over the other animals. We seem to be ruling over the earth. So what was it? So his idea was it was our rationality. We can think rationally, we can think objectively, we can think deeper, we can think further. And this rational capacity is what enables us to rise above the animal world. And yet, after that, there have been other thinkers pointed out that human beings, are remarkably capable of irrationality. That if we consider the animal world, animals often get caught by their own desires. Say fish gets caught by a bait, or mouse gets caught by cheese in a mouse trap. But in these cases, the animals have excuses. Whatever they are attracted to, it looks like food. And they don't know in advance that it is a trap. But we human beings, in many cases, don't have either of these excuses. We consider this smoking. A cigarette doesn't look like food to anyone. And everyone knows that it is harmful. I mean, a cigarette might be a modern invention, but some kind of intoxication has always been there throughout history. So human beings are capable of remarkably irrational behavior, even to the extent of hurting and destroying oneself. So Alexander Pope was another Western thinker, and he said that man is the pride and the terror of the human race. He said that human beings, at one level, they are the glory, at another level, they are the jest. We have ruled the world, but then we are ruled by something inside us, which makes us do stupid and even self-destructive things. So man is a riddle unto himself. Here the word man is used in a gender inclusive sense. as it was used for many generations in the past. So it's a riddle unto oneself. Why do we act the way we do? And as this thought process was going on further and further, until one of the most influential psychologists of all time, and especially of the last century, was a person named Sigmund Freud. And Sigmund Freud said that actually we are not rational creatures. He said we are driven primarily by our emotionality. So he envisioned that our emotions are like a vast turbulent ocean, and our rationality is like just a small canoe on top of that emotionality. And the canoe can move along and float along as long as the waves are peaceful. But the canoe can't control the ocean. When the waves become stormy, the canoe will be overturned. And the destruction will result. People will behave in remarkably irrational ways. And this idea, he's talk about it in a very gloomy sense. He said that yes, we try to be rational, but we just can't be rational because the lower modes are very strong. But unfortunately, this idea was taken by the modern culture, the modern advertising industry, and the broad modern thought system at large. And the idea was that actually, if you want to get people to do some things, you have to trigger their emotions. So the idea that our emotions can easily overcome our reason, our rationality. And that's how we ultimately behave, irrationally, emotionally, and sometimes self-destructively. So what to do about this? So at one time, the idea was that whatever emotions are there inside you, you just have to use your reason to restrain those emotions. But then some psychologists started saying that actually, repressing emotions doesn't work. So Freud had the idea that repressing emotions causes many kinds of different problems. So it is in the 20th century that mental health problems started becoming prominent. There are always some people who had mental health problems, but the single type of medicine that has sold more than any other medicine, the kind of medicine that didn't exist 50 years ago and is now the most sold medicine across the counter in the Western world, is medicine for mental health, whether it is for treating anxiety or for treating depression, antidepressants and tranquilizers. They didn't exist before the 1960s. And now, millions and millions of people take them. So, we'll talk a little bit more about why this has happened. But overall, the mind seems to be troubling people more and more and more. So psychology has historically tried various approaches to try to deal with it. Initially, the word psychology literally means logos is study, psyche is the mind, the study of the mind. But then afterwards, within psychology, some people started saying, what is the mind? As the scientific approach became more and more prominent, they said, we don't know what is the mind. Is there something called a mind also? We don't know. So they started reducing psychology to the study of behavior. Because after all, we can't see what is the mind. So just focus on the behavior. But still, another school of thought that came up was that actually our emotions inside are like a black box. Whatever is inside us is like a black box, and somehow we have to manage what is there inside the box. So they said that traditionally people are told, repress your emotions. So there was a phase especially in American history, in psychology, where people were told, just express your emotions and you'll become free from them. And for example, during the civil rights movement, there was a lot of antipathy between the whites and the African Americans. And at that time, under the influence of this school of psychology, some people said you just bring the whites and the blacks together in one room and let both of them vent their emotions. So the whites started speaking everything bad they felt about the blacks. And the blacks started speaking, African Americans started speaking everything that bad they felt about them. And by the end of it, neither felt release. Actually, both of them were on blows out to fight with each other. So the idea that just give vent to your emotions and you'll become free from them, that backfired very badly. And this especially came in the area of sexuality. So basically, if you look at our emotions, there's prominently there is lust and there is anger. The Bhagavad Gita talks about 3 gates to hell. What are those 3 gates? Kama krodha lobha. Trividham narkasyedam dwaram nashanam Kama krodha satha lobhas tasmad etat trayam tajit. 16.21 he says. Now if we consider, all 3 of these are basically emotions. Lust is basically the craving, the emotion associated with the object that promises us sensual gratification. Greed is the craving with respect to things, possessions. And then anger is the emotion associated with not getting certain things that we want. If I don't get something, I feel angry. But all 3 of them are emotions. So the idea was just give vent to whatever you feel. And when this came in the realm of sexuality, that led to what has been historically called the free sex revolution. So there is no need for traditional morality, no need for the regulation of marriage, no need for anything. Just freely express your sexual desires. I thought that that's how we will become peaceful. We will become the emotions that are troubling us. We just have to give free vent to them. Now, Sigmund Freud was one of the pioneers of this idea, and afterwards it captured the popular imagination. So he was a brilliant person in one way, but he was also, you could say, a perverted genius. In his childhood, he had some sexual attraction towards his mother. And he generalized from his experience, and he said that all boys have sexual attraction towards their mothers, and all girls have sexual attraction towards their fathers. And because of society's taboos, this attraction is suppressed. And because this attraction is suppressed, that's why when people grow up, they have all kinds of mental problems. Now, there was no empirical data to support this. And there was, later on, many thinkers have critiqued the idea that whether his theories are even scientific, they were just his ideas. But somehow, his ideas led to his theory led to the idea that there should be free sexual expression, free expression of emotions. And the result was chaos. Chaos. The Harvard Medical School did a study of students in prominent universities in America, where there was a free sex culture. And they found that these kids, the idea of free sex did not bring people closer to each other. It actually made people feel lonely and guilty. Lonely because although their bodies came in contact with many other bodies, their hearts remained untouched. There were no commitments in any relationships. And guilty because they knew that they were using others and that others were using them. So basically, the releasing of the emotion or the expression of those emotions in an unrestricted way, going the opposite of what the tradition was saying, did not result in anything positive. Now, in today's world, psychology has like any other branch, it has many different schools. But still, the idea that in the tradition, our emotions were repressed, and in the contemporary world, the emotions should be allowed to be expressed, that still prevails. And most people feel that there was one devotee in a first world country. Before he became a devotee, so he he was depressed and he went to a psychologist. He was telling me all this after all this happened. He said that, why are you feeling depressed? He says, actually, all that you need to do is just go out on a date. And he says, no, actually, I don't feel like going out. And even if I don't go out, nobody comes with me. He says, no, you just like give a pep talk. And then the psychologist, so there is a whole network. So he later discovered it. He says, psychologist, we have a group of people and you can contact some of them. And so what the psychologist would do is, psychologist gives a pep talk in order to make the people feel good. But there's a lot of stuff inside that is not processed. So he would call someone, and whoever would be the woman in that network, the woman would be paid to say yes and to flatter the boy. And then the boy would temporarily feel good. Oh, I went to the session, I felt good, I called someone, and she went out with me. We did whatever we wanted. For a few moments they'll feel high, but again they will come down. So the idea was that just give vent to your feelings and you'll be all right. But our emotions, we need to go beyond this duality of repressing them and expressing them. We need to go beyond repressing and expressing to processing them. So now, in the modern world, or in the Western world primarily, if you look at the state, the mind is hurting people like never before. At one level, in today's world, people are much more physically comfortable than ever before in the past. Luxuries that were unimaginable for people even a few centuries ago, they are commonplace. Air conditioning, there is cell phone, there is air travel. All these are commonplace. At a physical level, there are comforts, and yet at a mental level, there is enormous distress. So much so that in the first world, sociologists say that 1 out of every 4 persons will have a serious mental health problem in some course of their life, during the course of their life. And 1 out of every 10 persons will contemplate suicide at some point in their lives. Now, all living beings struggle to live. Survival of the fittest, struggle for existence, these are the defining features of humanity. But yet, what we see in today's world is that people are so distressed that they're ready to destroy themselves. And another level, if we see that at one level, the mind's distress is very high. But at another level, the mind is being pandered to much, much more than ever before. What do I mean by the mind is being pandered to? Who are the professionals today who are paid the most in today's world? Sorry? Marketing, sales, sports. Yeah. Sports is on the right track. Actors, yeah. Basically, entertainers. Now, many professions get paid. Doctors get paid a lot. Lawyers get paid a lot. Software engineers get paid a lot. But if you consider, right now in India, IPL is going on. So in the Indian Premier League, the cricketers, for 50 days of playing, they earn more than what most Indians earn 50 years. And crores. So now, why is it that entertainers are being paid so much? What? Yeah? Because people are looking for entertainment. Yes. Now, actually at one level, entertainment has always been a part of human society. And it's a natural, necessary part of human society. But the obsession with entertainment that is there in today's world, that is unprecedented. And people are ready to pay so much because they feel that it is such a vital need. Sometimes when, say, droughts are there or famines are there, at that time, some business people, they hoard grains. And the prices of the grains shoot up. Now, because it's a vital necessity, you can't live without food. So no matter what price is being charged, people will pay it and somehow get the food. So if something is a necessity, then whatever the price we pay, it requires we pay it to get it. So now, if you're paying a huge amount of money for entertainment, that means that we feel that entertainment is such a need that whatever the cost, we're ready to pay for it. So now, if we consider entertainment, whose need is it? Does the body need entertainment? Whose need is it? Mind. It's the mind's need. The body needs food, water, air. So entertainment is something which is craved for by the mind. It is provided to the mind. So we can see at one level that the mind's need is being provided for like never before. And yet the mind is hurting us like never before. So where exactly are things going wrong? What exactly is happening that the mind is hurting us so much? And although we are doing so many things, as I said, on one level, entertainment is one way the mind need is being taken care of. Another level is mental health medicines. They are also being provided for. But still the mind seems to be more and more distressed. If we say, oh, life is so stressful, life is so uncertain, life is so troublesome, well, at one level, it's true, but at another level, life has always been troublesome in the world. We may say, oh, we may lose our job, we may lose this. Well, okay, in the past, people feel they would lose their lives. Their wars were there, so many uncertainties were there. Sometimes we have this idea that there are people who are traditionally, they say the past was so good. And people who are proud of the progress of modern, the past was so bad. So some people tend to romanticize the past. Oh, everything was so nice in the past. Now modern times are so bad. And some people tend to demonize the past. You know, this was happening in the past. That was happening in the past. That was happening in the past. So, actually speaking, the world, in a sense, doesn't change much. The world is what it is always. Now we say, oh, there is so much cancer. There's this disease, that disease. But if we consider in the medieval times, there was a black plague, and 1/3 of Europe was wiped out by that one disease. So Genghis Khan, now we talk about fear of terrorists. Terrorists may bomb up and blow up places. But when Genghis Khan attacked, in the medieval time, there are two main population shocks. One was the Black Plague, and the other was Genghis Khan. His attack, he just killed thousands and thousands and thousands of people wherever he went. So basically, the point I'm making here is that the world has always been what it is. In today's world, we may say, oh, this has happened, this bomb exploded there, this plane crashed there, this happened there, that happened there. It's just because the world is so interconnected that we come to know about the distresses, that troubles everywhere. Yes, in some ways, we could say moral standards have gone down. In some ways, instability and insecurity is greater. But in many ways, the world stays the same. It's not that in the world, problems have suddenly shot up. The world, as the Bhagavad Gita says, is actually a place of distress always. So there is something else going on because of which the mind is so agitated. So to understand this, let's look at the Bhagavad Gita setting. The Bhagavad Gita also demonstrates at its very beginning how the mind can attack a person. And not just an ordinary person, a warrior. Arjuna is fully ready to fight a war. He has raised his bow and come forward in the middle of the battlefield as as one of the primary warriors in his army. And at one moment, he's ready to fight the war with his bow raised. A few moments later, if we consider the Bhagavad Gita has 700 verses which can be spoken, if we recite them fast, we can recite the whole Gita in about 1.5 to 2 hours. So the first chapter has 46 verses. In the 20th verse, it is described that Arjuna has raised his hand and is ready to fight. By the 46th verse of the Gita, he's put his bow down, there are tears in his eyes, tam tatha krupaya vishtam, ashru purna kulekshanam. His tears are flowing in his eyes. He says, Nayotseti Govindam, I can't fight. He's given up. So from the 20th verse to 46th verse, it probably takes 2 to 3 minutes to recite them. At the most 3 to 4 minutes, 5 minutes if you recite it slowly. So a warrior who had prepared for fighting the biggest war of his life, who had prepared for that war for years, decades, he performed extraordinary austerities, gone to the heavens, got weapons. This was the biggest moment of his life. And just at that moment, something happened and he collapsed. So, for a warrior to put aside his bow is like accepting defeat. And this warrior was such a formidable warrior, Arjuna, that nobody could have defeated him. And yet, he was defeated. He put aside his bow. So, what happened? The mind attacked him. The mind became filled with some emotions, some thoughts, some ideas, and just went wild because of that. And as it went wild, he started giving different kind of this reason, that reason, but nothing seemed to make sense. And eventually just quit. So the Bhagavad Gita demonstrates how the inner world is actually much more consequential than the outer world. We focus a lot on the outer world and making things better in the outer world. And most of technology has focused on improving things, in improving the outer world. But the improved things cannot help us if we do not have improved thoughts. And how to improve our thoughts, that the modern education system doesn't talk about much. That modern science, modern technology, none of them talk about it much. So Arjuna had a powerful weapon, the celestial bow Gandiva. He had great skills. He had the best setting for exhibiting his skills. He had it was not just an exhibition, it was a vital need for establishing Dharma. And yet he crumbled at that time. So in a broad sense of parallels, just as today we see people afflicted by their minds, similarly the Bhagavad Gita begins by talking about a person who was afflicted by the mind. The specific causes of the mental distress may be different. For us, we may be, I lost my job, I had a separation in my relationship, this went wrong, that went wrong. For us, the specific cause of the mental distress may be something else. For Arjuna, his mental distress came from an ethical crisis. Should I fight or should I not fight? So that itself is a philosophical discussion, which we can go into elsewhere if required. But the point here is, essentially what happened? The principle of the mind attacking and hurting and disempowering the body or the person, that is common. And how does the Gita address this? We talk about emotionality and rationality. Emotionality is our capacity to feel, this is like this is like that. We just feel emotions in relationship with things. Rationality is our capacity to analyze things. So the theme which the first session of this Bhagavad Gita Modern Psychology was, is there anything beyond emotionality and rationality? Because in modern psychology, at one side they said that rationality should be supreme. We should use our rational intelligence and control our animal emotions. Man is a rational animal. But then later they said, this kind of control is actually repression. You should not repress, you just express yourself. But expressing itself has led to a chaos of a different kind. So should we go along with our emotionality or should we go along with our rationality? Actually, the Bhagavad Gita says that we should go along with something beyond both of these. Beyond our emotionality and beyond our rationality is our spirituality. The spirituality refers to the essence of who we are. And to the extent we understand that we are beyond the emotions that we experience, that we are beyond the reasoning that we do, To that extent, we can analyze and act appropriately. We can both use our reasoning faculty and we can use our emotional faculty. So I would like to do a simple thought experiment to illustrate what I mean by talking about that we are beyond our emotionality and our rationality. So all of you, wherever you are, you can sit comfortably and close your eyes. Closing your eyes, now you can take 3 deep breaths with me. 1, 2, 3. Now, with your eyes closed, try to see what you see in front of you. Because your eyes are closed, you can't see physically what is in front of you. But still, there is something like an inner screen on which you may see various things. You may see this temple room, you may see your home, you may see your car, you may see your phone, you may see your loved ones. You may see various images coming and going on that inner screen. Or you might just see a dull haze of various colors on that screen. But irrespective of whatever you see on the screen, now try to take a step back and catch sight of who it is that is looking at that inner screen. There's this inner screen, but who is the inner seer who is looking at that inner screen? Take a step back and try to look at that inner seer. No matter how many steps you take back, the inner seer steps back with you. What you're looking for is what you're looking with. You, that inner seer, are the soul. The inner screen is the mind. You can take 1 deep breath and then you can open your eyes. Thank you. So basically, as in psychology considers the inner world to be like a black box. But the simple thought exercise which we did, we can understand that inside us there are 2 things. There is whatever you're seeing right now, actually, this is the outer scene. And we don't directly interact with the outer scene. The outer scene gets imprinted on us, inside us, as an image on the inner screen. And we respond to whatever happens on the inner screen. So sometimes this inner screen just shows us something else. And we may be looking at someone and then our thoughts go somewhere else. Our thoughts go somewhere else at that time. Hey, what happened? What I'm thinking about? The other person may tell us, hey, come back, where are you? Earth to you, earth to you. What happens over there? The outer scene is as it is, but the inner screen has gone somewhere else. So inside us, there is the inner screen and there is the inner seer. So most systems of psychology, they just equate everything into one. That inside us, there is something. There is the emotionality, rationality, but how does it all come together? So yes, we have an emotional side, we have a rational side. But beyond that, we are different from both of these. The Bhagavad Gita uses the word mana, buddhi, and ahankar. That mind, intelligence, and ego to refer to the components of the subtle world. The subtle body, so there are 3 levels of reality: the physical reality, the mental reality, and the spiritual reality. So what we see outside the sense perception is the physical reality. in what is inside us, what acts as a medium, link between the physical and spiritual reality, that is the subtle reality. And beyond that is the soul. Now, in the subtle reality, sometimes we differentiate between, as I said, the mind, intelligence, and ego. But this differentiation is primarily a matter of nomenclature. It's a functional difference. It's not a structural difference. By what do I mean by functional and structural? So consider there's a computer. The hardware is there, the software is there, the user is there. So the body is like the hardware, the mind is the software, the subtle body is the software, and the soul is the user. Now, in this software, we may have multiple levels of software. We might have the OS, which is the fundamental level of the operating system. That's without that nothing functions. Then beyond the operating system, we may have some pre-installed programs, or we may have some user-installed programs. And then along with that, we may have some viruses. Now the operating system, the desired programs and the unwanted programs, all three of them are essentially nothing but digital codes. They're all programs. If you look at them technically, they're just codes of 01000101. They're coded in a particular way so that they perform a particular function. So structurally, there's no difference between the operating system, the application that the programs we are using, and the unwanted viruses that are there. Functionally, they work in different ways. So similarly, the ego, the intelligence, and the mind, they are structurally not different. All three of them are subtle body. Functionally, they work in different ways. So when we talk about the emotionality and the rationality, basically we are talking about the mind and the intelligence. So these, we could say, are two features of the subtle body. So in some people, the emotionality is more than the rationality. Some people, the rationality is more than the emotionality. So that's why some people are more emotional, some people are more rational. But essentially, the people are different from their emotionality and their rationality. Their emotionality and rationality are basically features of the subtle body. So just like we have certain computers may be good for certain purposes. Some computers are designed to be very lightweight, very low cost, and they're used primarily for surfing the net or just doing some light data processing. So writing some documents or something like that. Some computers may be designed for doing heavy, say, video editing work and doing a lot of heavy data processing. So they are structured in different ways. So they are both computers essentially, but they function in different ways. So similarly, rationality and emotionality are features of the mind. So the word mind can mean many different things. The word mind can refer to one component within the subtle body, the mind, intelligence, and ego. The word mind can generically also be used to refer to the whole subtle body. So there's mind, matter, and there's matter, mind, and consciousness. So matter is physical reality, mind is subtle reality, and consciousness is spiritual reality. So both can be understood in two different ways. The important thing is not the nomenclature that we use. The important thing is the functionality that we understand. Once we understand the functionality, then we can understand what makes us either what makes us function properly and what prevents us from functioning properly. So now if you consider the computer, say somebody has repeatedly visited a particular site on the computer. Say they visited Bollywood.com. They keep visiting it again and again and again. And then now they come to a spiritual program and then they hear Oh, there's a book, it's the Bhagavad Gita. I want to know about it. And they go on their Google browser and they type Bhagavad Gita. And as soon as they type B, what happens? Bollywood comes up. Why? Because that's what is the preference stored in the computer. So similarly for us, in the subtle body, certain preferences, certain inclinations are stored. And whichever inclinations are stored, they pop up. So in some of us, now these inclinations can be of different kinds. Some of us, we may be more emotional. So we think more in terms of emotions. Some of us, we think more in terms of reason. But essentially, these two are resources. And there is a source who is using these resources. And that source is the soul. So the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna on one side, he's saying, oh, how can I fight and how can I tolerate the death of my loved ones? But he also thinks, how can I not fight? No, there my loved ones will die if I don't fight. If I fight. But if I don't fight, then my loved ones here, they will suffer. So he's caught, what should I do? What should I not do? He does some reasoning, he feels some emotions, he's not able to figure out. So the Bhagavad Gita solution begins by telling Arjuna that you are different from all this. That you are the soul. And the soul is different from whatever emotions are being felt and whatever reasoning you're doing. Reasoning is valuable, emotions are also valuable. But they both need to be directed towards some higher purpose. And that higher purpose is what the Bhagavad Gita reveals. And we see at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna has become calm, he has become composed. So the Bhagavad Gita's knowledge helped him to deal with the distress that his mind was creating. Now, how exactly the Bhagavad Gita helped him to deal with the distress? That we won't go into the technicalities of that knowledge, but in tomorrow's and day after session, we'll talk about how the Bhagavad Gita's broad principles help us to manage our inner world. So I'll summarize what I spoke today. I spoke today about the theme of Bhagavad Gita and modern psychology. And in that I started by first talking about how, firstly, nature, when we observe, there is something distinctive about human beings. Although we are not physically stronger or faster than other animals, still we are ruling them. So man is what some people thought a rational animal. Rationality is what distinguishes us. But then we are capable of terrible irrationality, as is seen in self-destructive habits. And so some thinkers thought that actually we are not really rational, we think ourselves, but there is an emotionality that is like an ocean that will overthrow the canoe. And as the current century started to come, in the previous century, in this century, on one level, people are more and more physically comfortable, but still they are mentally distressed. The mind is hurting people more and more in terms of mental health problems. Conversely, we are giving medication to treat the mind. We are offering entertainment to pander to the mind. But something seems to be going wrong. So some thinkers thought that traditionally our emotions were suppressed, and that's why mental health problems come. So now let's just give unrestricted expression to the emotions. But that resulted only in further agitation. It did not lead to any inner peace, any inner contentment. Society has become, both in terms of anger and lust, the unwanted expression has led to problems. So what is it that, are we emotional, are we rational? We moved from the current setting to the Bhagavad Gita setting, where there also a warrior was overpowered by his mind, and thus he ended up being incapable of fighting at the moment of the greatest fight of his life. So the Bhagavad Gita begins by telling us that our reasoning and our emotions both can be guides, but we are something beyond both of them. So we did a thought experiment about the outer scene, the inner screen, and the inner seer. So the inner screen, the Bhagavad Gita says, is a subtle level of reality. And subtle level of reality essentially is the interface between the physical and the spiritual, just as the software is the interface between the body and the soul. The software can have different features. We have different types of softwares can be there. The operating system, the installed software, the unwanted softwares, like that. But they are functionally different. Structurally, they are the same. So similarly, mind, intelligence, ego, they are functionally different. Structurally, they are the same. You can broadly correlate the mind with the emotional faculty, the intelligence with the rational faculty. But these two faculties, they are themselves not good or bad. Just like some computers are designed for doing particular purposes. So emotional faculty is useful in some cases, rational faculty is useful in some cases. But both need to be directed by someone. By someone who is beyond the two, and they should be directed to some purpose which is beyond the two. So the identity of that being which is beyond the two, that we discussed, that is the soul, the inner seer of the inner screen and the outer scene. And how it is to be directed, to what purpose it is to be directed, that we'll discuss in our future sessions. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions or comments?
Oh, I wanted to know what is Chitta Korea. What is Chitta? Where you will take that.
Okay. What exactly is Chitta? It's a little technical. Let me try to explain this. The Atma has a feature of Sat Chit Ananda. So Chit means consciousness. So consciousness is the innate feature of the soul. Now Chitta refers to embodied consciousness. Consciousness that comes into the body. At one level, it comes into the body. The consciousness that is channeled into the body. Say like a child is at home comfortably, mother is nearby, but the child is watching a horror movie. And the child's consciousness is completely glued to the horror movie. The child is here, the face is here, the TV screen is over there. Now what is happening on the TV screen? The child's consciousness is completely riveted to that. And the child experiences emotions not based on where he is or where she is, but based on what is happening on that screen. So similarly for us, we are like the soul, who is different from this world. But the soul's consciousness is caught in matter. Purushaha prakritistohi bhumte prakritijan gunan. So prakritistohi, the soul has become situated in material nature. Like that, our consciousness got projected into the world. And this projected consciousness is called as Chitta. So Chitta is like the consciousness that is locked on the screen of the TV. And that's why in the Bhagavad Gita, although Krishna first says that the soul, consciousness is a feature of the soul, avinashi tu tadviddhi, he says in 2.17. But later, in the 13th chapter, he says, Ichha dvesha sukham dukkham sanghatas chetanadhiti etat kshetram samasena savikaram udharutam. He's talking about the Sankhya philosophy in 13.6 and 7. So 13.7 he's saying that Chetana, consciousness, is a kshetra vikar. Krishna talks kshetra and kshetragya. Kshetra is the body and the kshetragya is the knower of the body, the soul. Kshetra vikar means transformation of the kshetra. So now he's saying that Chetana, consciousness, is a transformation of the material nature. Now how can we say that? Consciousness is actually spiritual. So how can consciousness be a transformation of material nature? Krishna is here talking about projected consciousness. See, all over the world, people feel hungry. We all are living in a particular body. We need food. But all over the world, when people feel hungry and think of food, they may think of different things. South Indian may think of idli sambar. A Punjabi may think of paratha. A Gujarati may think of a dhokla. Now, why this? The food is a biological need, but different people think of different things. Why? Because the consciousness is transformed according to the kind of material nature it is placed. So if the consciousness is placed in a South Indian body, Then when the desire for food comes, it thinks of, say, idli sambar. When the consciousness is placed in a Punjabi body, then that consciousness at a thought of food thinks of, say, paratha. So basically, chitta refers to the embodied consciousness. Now, chittete gurumukha padnavakya chittete kori aikya. What this means is that, say, this child is watching a horror movie. Child is so horrified. Hey, this is going wrong, that's going wrong, that's going wrong. Now the mother sees the child is watching a horror movie, and the mother will want to comfort the child. But the child is so caught in the movie that the mother puts the child on the hand on the child's shoulder. The child will start screaming then. Child is completely caught in that. So what the mother does is gradually, if there is a second remote for that TV, she takes that remote, starts changing the TV. Starts changing the TV channel, and maybe if you have a recording of some happy moment the child has enjoyed with the mother, they have gone for a picnic, they have gone for they had some fun, they're playing together. Mother starts playing that on the TV. Child starts saying, hey, who is this? It looks nice. I think I know her. And the child starts looking at it, and the child gets intrigued. And slowly, the child starts feeling peaceful. Oh, I know her. She's so nice. And then as the child starts feeling more peaceful, more connected. Then when the mother puts the hand on the child, shoulder, oh, you're here. The child will just hug the mother. And the horror movie will get over. So similarly for us, Krishna is right next to us. In our own bodies. He's there next to us in our own hearts. But we are so caught in the material world that our consciousness is projected here. And so we just can't perceive the presence of Krishna. So that's why Krishna manifests in the material world. He manifests as the deities, he manifests as the scriptures, he manifests as the holy name, he manifests through the devotees. And to the extent we tune our consciousness on this, to that extent our consciousness becomes spiritualized. So generally people say to become spiritual you should go inside yourself. But right now if we try to go inside ourselves, the first thing we encounter is the mind. And the mind is wild. So most of the time people say if you go into solitude, be peaceful. But most of the time when we go into solitude, that's when we get agitated. Now, sociologists have found, when do people get worried the most? It is when they have nothing to do. During their leisure time, people get wild. During our leisure time, our mind works overtime. And this person said like this went wrong, that went wrong. So we can't very easily go inwards directly. So what happens? We go outwards to where the spiritual is present. So that's why we come to a temple, we chant the holy names. By this, gradually our consciousness starts becoming spiritualized. And when the consciousness becomes spiritualized thus, then we start tuning into the presence of Krishna also. So it is at the spiritual level of consciousness that the chit aspect of the Atma can be perceived when the Atma is perceived. But till then, what we can perceive is the chitta. So, mat chitta sarvadurgani mat prasadat darshasi. Chitta, we are going to perceive this material world itself. But in the material world, we try to perceive the stimuli connected with Krishna. So, chitta basically refers to the inner screen and the outer scene. So, it primarily refers to the inner screen. So, chit refers to the inner seer's seeing faculty, capacity for consciousness. The inner screen is the chitta. So all that we experience right now in the embodied state is the inner screen. We can just think that there is an inner seer, but we can't perceive the inner seer. So even the outer world comes in the inner scene. So basically when we become purified, right now, when we bring Krishna in the outer scene, then he comes on the inner screen. We come in front of the deities and take darshan, then we think of Krishna. But as we become more and more purified, then even when the Krishna is not there in the outer scene, he will be there in the inner screen. And that's how our spiritualization of consciousness will happen. Okay.
Is this chit is inner screen, as you say? But is it like beyond mind, intelligence, and ego? We have three subtle substances, but mind, intelligence, ego. So where does it fit in?
Okay.
Is it this is the fourth?
Okay, I
more
got the
subtle
question.
than
Okay.
the mind?
So is
intelligence, ego?
chitta like a fourth thing in the subtle level? No, not exactly. As I said, the differences between these are functional. They're not exactly structural. If you consider even the Bhagavad Gita, all the seventh chapter, Krishna says, Bhumirapo nalavayu kham mano buddhirevacha ahankara ityamya bhinna prakrishta. Then he talks about mind, intelligence, ego as the three components of subtle body. But then, if we consider in the third chapter, when he's talking about the inner hierarchy, he's talking about Indriyani Manobuddhir, Indriyani Paranyahur, Indriyebhya Parammana, Manasastu Parabuddhe, Yo Buddhe Paratastu Saha. In 3.42, he says, about the body are the senses, about the senses is the mind, about the mind is the intelligence, and beyond the intelligence is the soul proper. So there he doesn't talk about the ego. In the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when they talk about the subtle body, it also says that the antakarana. There is the like karana refers to senses. So antakarana can be many different things. Like the karan, the senses. So there are subtle senses also that are present in the body.
Gross and subtle both are in antakarana.
Yeah. So now let me drive a point over here. Now, some people talk also about there is some in the yoga school. See, the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita, they talk about the inner world drawing from Sankhya. If you go into yoga, they also talk about what do you call it as the Akashik Sharir. The body, but it's a subtle level. And then some people talk about Akashic record where our past karma is stored. In the 11th canto, in the Uddhav Gita, like we talk about the 24 elements of material nature. So there, it's at one place analyzes 16 elements, another place analyzes 24 elements. So Krishna makes a comment to Uddhava over there. So at that time, and Vishwanath Chakravarti explains his commentary, that the material nature can be analyzed in different ways. And by such analysis, the sages show their creativity. And if such analysis brings their thinking towards me, then it is beneficial. So I would say the specific categorization will vary. Just like if you consider a map. Now we can have a map of America, which is a political map. We can have a topographical map, which talks about rivers and land. Political map will talk about boundaries. We may have a road map, which will talk about the roads. We may have a mineral map, which talks only about primarily what is below the earth. So these are basically models. And there is, of course, some similarity in the maps, but there are some dissimilarities also because each map is meant for a particular purpose. So, in my understanding, chitta would refer to the way the subtle body is functioning. So, chitta is a way of referring to the consciousness as it is manifested at the subtle level. So it's not a fourth component apart from mind, intelligence, and ego. Rather, it is, if we consider the subtle body to be like the inner screen. So chitta can be used to refer generically to our inner screen. So it refers to the subtle level of reality at a generic level. It's like software is a generic word referring to all three. There can be either operating systems, installed software, viruses. They're all software. So chitta is like a generic term which refers to all of it. Chitta, we could say, is like an equivalent of the subtle body. But in some cases, chitta may be used in a somewhat different sense. So broadly, chitta refers to embodied consciousness, and that embodied consciousness works through the mind, intelligence, and ego in different ways. So it could be said to be the substratum or the combination of all of them which are working together. Okay, thank you. Yes, bro.
You have two questions. First one is for mental problems that you said, medications out there. Medications are material. Mental problems are related to the mind is subtle. So how can something that is material treat something that is subtle?
Okay. So If people take mental health medicines, the mind is subtle, whereas the medicines are physical, gross. How can the gross treat the subtle? The mind is is at the level of interface between the physical body and the soul. So in some yoga schools, yoga itself is one school of thought, but within that also there are different schools. So in some commentators on the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, they talk about the mind at three levels. They say the outer mind, the middle mind, and the inner mind. So the outer mind is that part of the mind which interfaces with the physical body. The middle mind is the subtle level of reality. The inner mind is what is capable of spiritual consciousness. It's more connected with the soul. So now, if we consider, although the mind is subtle, the mind's emotions are affected by physical stimuli. Say, for example, if you're agitated and our breath starts becoming faster, and if we consciously slow down our breath, breathe in, breathe out, slow down the breath, the mind calms down. So the breath is a physical activity. Breathing is a physical activity, but it decreases the agitation of the mind because the mind is not, although it is another category, but it is not completely disconnected. It is connected. So physical stimuli affect the mind. It is not the problem is not to say that physical stimuli affect the mind is just normal experience. But like that way, no, we eat good food, it tastes good, we feel happy. So physical stimuli, it's affecting the mental state. So similarly, if we consider laughter, at one level, to talk about say this state of inner mind, outer mind, and middle mind. Now, sometimes if you consider laughter, sometimes we go to some relatives or friend's house and they have a small child. We have to have fun with that child. We start tickling the belly of that child. When you tickle the belly of that child, the child will start laughing. Now, if the child laughs, is that laughter happiness? Is laughing? That laughter is not happiness. If it were happiness, and all of us want to be happy, so we could all have our own perpetual tickling machines. Tickle, 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 be happy for the rest of your life. Happiness is not that simple. And yet, somebody who's crying and they tickle them, they will start laughing at that time and they forget they're crying. So the physical affects the mental. The mistake is to think that the physical and the mental are only the same. So yes, a physical stimulation may provide may stimulate laughter, and that laughter may make some people forget their distress temporarily at least. So a child is crying a tickle, then the child may stop crying and start laughing. But happiness is not reducible to the laughter. Sometimes some people will be laughing, but internally they may be distressed. So the physical does affect the mental. Because ultimately we are living in a physical body. So all the emotions that we experience, they will have a physical expression. Let's say, for example, if I'm laughing because I hear some mundane joke, or if I hear some joke in a spiritual class, that laughter is going to be expressed through my vocal cord, same vocal cord. The laughter is going to appear on the same face. So similarly, whatever emotions we experience, they are going to create some effect on the brain. In the brain, they say that when we are happy, certain chemicals are secreted. The brain is very complicated, and it is not so simple. But just for analytical purposes, say when we are happy, certain chemicals are secreted in the brain. When we are angry, certain other chemicals are secreted in the brain. When we are depressed, certain other chemicals are secreted. So now, what medication tries to do is, if we are worried, At that time, a certain chemical is secreted. And when we are peaceful, certain chemical is secreted. What they try to do is take some medication by which the secretion of the chemical, the enzyme that is secreted when we get agitated, when we get worried, decrease that, suppress that. And the enzyme that feels peaceful, it will feel increase that. Now, again, this is a very simple bare bones analysis. The brain works in a much more complicated way. But now this can help to some extent. Because just like if somebody is sitting glum, come on, cheer up, smile. If they smile, they will feel a little better. People say that you just sit in the erect posture, you feel better. But suppose, say I'm sitting on this chair and there are nails on this chair and the nails are piercing me. Now, whether I'm sitting slouched or I'm sitting erect, the nails are still going to pierce me. Is it? That physical reality is not going to change. So, some brain, if there is clearly documented shortage of certain chemicals in the brain which are meant to be normally produced and they're not getting produced for some reason, and that is impeding the functioning, then taking some medication can help. I know one devotee couldn't sleep for several months, and nobody could find out why he was not able to sleep. And finally, he went to a doctor, an expert doctor. He said, actually, there's a chemical which is which is meant to promote sleep, and that is short in your body. You give some medication, just next from that night he was able to sleep peacefully. That is not exactly a sleep-inducing medicine. That is not advisable on a regular basis. For people who have insomnia, they sometimes take it, but that's not, as a regular dependence is not advisable. But if something which is essential to be produced in the brain is not being produced, then treating it with some medicine is good. But just the inability to deal with our emotions and trying to medicate away those emotions, that is unhealthy. Does that answer your question?
This is related to the question, that Chitta question. So Chitta was saying that it is a projected consciousness. So is there something non-projected consciousness
Yes.
also in our body, or
Is the non-projected consciousness in our body? Well, the soul is different from the body. So you could say the soul is is there in our body. In that sense, the non-projected consciousness is also there within us. But the soul is not physical. So to exactly reduce it to a physical location, we may do it for representation or conceptualization. But the soul is transcendental. That's why the example is given, two examples the Bhagavad Gita gives. Yatha akashasito nityam vayu sarvatra gomahan tha sarvani bhutani matsthani tyupadharaya tha prakashyateka kritsnam lokamimam ravi kshetram kshetritha kritsnam prakashyati bharata. He says first that just as the sky is present everywhere, but it doesn't mix with the rest of the world. If you consider the sky to be like a amorphous presence, it's present everywhere. But it doesn't mix. Similarly, the consciousness is present everywhere, but it doesn't mix. And the next example it uses is the sun is at one place, but it illumines the whole world, all the universe, you could say. Similarly, the soul is present in one place, but it illumines the whole body. And in this way, the soul is separate, and the soul is still the activator of the body. So you could say the non-projected consciousness, the soul is essentially the non-projected consciousness. The soul is present in the body, but the soul, you cannot reduce it to the body. The soul is transcendental. So the non-projected consciousness is the soul. The projected consciousness is the soul's consciousness being channeled into the body. Okay.
one more question?
Yeah.
The subtle body. So when soul leaves body, the subtle body dies, or
Subtle body goes. Subtle body goes with the soul.
subtle body goes with the soul. And again, it's another birth that.
Yes. It's just like, say, you are using one computer and then you sell away that computer. Then you go into another computer and then you log on. Say, as soon as you log on with your Gmail ID, all your preferences, all your favorites, all of them get transferred over there. Similarly, the computer is like the physical body. When the soul goes into a new body, that like the soul logs in. And all of that is stored in the mind. and that also comes with it.
So is the past karma goes with the subtle?
Yes, the impressions are stored in the subtle body. Yes.
Just want to comment about my opinion is that the more entertainment we give to your mind, and the more stuff and entertainment and fun that you give to your mind, that's not with Krishna consciousness, your mind gets spoiled and it knows that you can give it to it, so it becomes more greedy and it asks for more, which causes a hardship to our mind, which makes the modern day more
Agitated. Yes, thank you. You're told today what I was going to speak in tomorrow's class. So, tomorrow the theme I was going to speak is how entertainment is. I was going to speak about what is mindfulness, how mindfulness helps, and how mindfulness falls short. Mindfulness is very big, but what I was going to speak was how entertainment is like a painkiller. It helps, but it helps not by curing, but covering the pain. And what we need is not entertainment. Okay, entertainment, like a patient is sick, entertainment is good. Sorry. When a patient is sick, painkiller may be necessary because the pain is too bad. But that is not the complete thing. So sometimes, entertainment is fine sometimes once in a while. It's like a painkiller. But only painkiller is bad. So the real curative medicine is not for the mind, is not entertainment, but enlightenment. So that is the curative medicine. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Okay. One last question.
Related to this question, Prabhu's question about mental illness. Now, as devotees, do we expect too much out of the holy names? So one may think generally that chant, you have a mental problem, chant. You're not able to focus, chant. You have any serious mental problems, chant, that might cure the problem. But from what I understand, based on what you're saying, the medicine is needed to.
Okay.
So as devotees,
okay.
kind of take it for granted just by chanting, remembering the Lord, taking the holy names, will cure any.
Okay, so as devotees, do we over expect from the holy name
Correct. That's what I meant.
that the holy name should cure everything? There are important principles foundationally that have to be understood. I wanted to finish at 9 o'clock. Can I answer this question? It'll take around 5 to 10 minutes at least.
Maybe tomorrow's fun also.
Sorry?
It's okay. Let's finish. Go ahead.
Okay, finish this. Okay, thank you. Okay. So, see, the material and the spiritual are two different levels of reality. Let us start first with radical difference and then we'll come to connection. So, if my hand gets fractured, do I expect that by chanting Hare Krishna the fracture will get healed? Yeah, I mean, Krishna can do anything. Krishna can heal the fracture just by my chanting also. But that is not the normal way which Krishna functions. And that is not the devotee's mood that we demand. Krishna, I'm chanting, so now you must fix my hand. No, a devotee has a mood of service. The mood of service means we go to a doctor. And this is not just because we're not advanced devotees. If we see in the Vedic tradition, there was a whole treatment of system of Ayurveda. And the system of Ayurveda is basically about the diseases are because of some material imbalances in the body. And to treat those diseases, we need to cure those material imbalances. That means a material problem has a material solution. Now, of course, that material solution can be taken with spiritual consciousness. Traditionally, it was understood that Vishnu is the curer. When we take the medicine, we will remember Vishnu. But there's a material mechanism also which acts over there. So, now another example of this. After hearing the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna fought the Kurukshetra war. And he won the Kurukshetra war. Now, did he win that war by the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita that he studied? Or did he not win that war by the knowledge of archery that he had learned throughout his life? Both. Yes, both. That's correct. Now, the Bhagavad Gita itself did not teach him archery. Archery he had learned throughout his life. The Bhagavad Gita gave him direction or inspiration about how and why to use his archery skills. So the material and the spiritual are not replaceable, but they are complementary, with the spiritual directing the material. Now, we often talk about material problems, spiritual solutions. What it means is that it is a solution that is implemented with spiritual consciousness. It is not that the solution itself is solely spiritual. Srila Prabhupada at one stage, at one level said, chant Hare Krishna and be happy. But then he also talked about the material situation socially and how to address it. One way he suggested addressing it was through Varnashram. Now, Varnashram is a social organization. It's a material organization. Varnashram can be spiritualized when it is done for the pleasure of Krishna. But otherwise, it is Shrama eva hi kevalam, as the Bhagavatam says. So, ultimately, when we are functioning at the material level, there is some material system that is required for functioning. And when material system, if it is done with spiritual consciousness, if it is done with spiritual purpose, then it can be spiritualized. So, having understood this broad, that there's material and there's spiritual, now we can say somebody can chant Hare Krishna and Krishna can provide food for that person. Yes, Krishna can provide that food, but that food will still be something material. Somebody has to provide through someone. Now, sometimes Krishna may, just like Durvasa Muni and his followers, Krishna internally satisfied them. And they started belching. Now again, belching is a physical phenomenon. So somehow Krishna filled them internally so that there is a physical sensation of fullness which came as belching. But in general, the way the tradition works is that there is the physical and there is the spiritual. And even those who are spiritual, they work at the physical level to deal with the physical. So if there is a disease, go to a doctor and take treatment. So now with respect to mental health problems, we have to see what works. As if we consider that there is a doctor and there is a patient. Each patient is different. And the doctor's purpose is not just to give the medicine. Doctor's purpose is to get the patient cured. So now chanting is extremely powerful, and tomorrow in Mindfulness, I'll talk about how chanting works, and last session will be especially about direct practice of Bhakti. But if somebody's mind is so agitated that they're not able to focus on the holy name, then the chanting may not calm the mind. Sometimes, recently one devotee was asking me, it seems that first we tell people when they come first when I came, I was told that you chant and you'll be able to control the mind. But now I am chanting, now I am being told you should control your mind and chant. So, what is it really? Is it that chanting will control the mind, or I have to control my mind and chant? Actually, it is both. Now, to do anything in life, we need some amount of control of the mind. Even if somebody wants to watch a cricket match, now cricket match is going on, but if at that time you think, what is on this TV? Or I want to watch this movie also. I want to watch this song also. I want to see this also. Or I get distracted by things. You can't even enjoy a cricket match. So to do anything, some level of mental control is required. But the speciality of the holy name is that it will purify us. And when it purifies us, then whatever is driving the mind agitated, that will be calmed down. So that's how the chanting will address the agitation of the mind at the most foundational level. But whether it will work immediately when the mind is agitated, we have to see from person to person. Because ultimately, the holy name has to enter into our consciousness. If we are so agitated, the holy name is not entering into the consciousness, then we may have to see what will calm the consciousness down. We chant every day, but sometimes, some days, If we hear an inspiring class about the holy name and then we sit down for chanting, it will chant better. What has happened? The buddhi has been nourished, and when the mind wanders, we get the mind back at that time. So it's not that the holy name doesn't have Krishna's all potencies, but it's that we have to follow the standard process for dealing with different issues. And sometimes a person is very hurt. There's a terrible misunderstanding between two people, and they need to talk properly. They need to maybe talk with a counselor or talk through a counselor to each other. And then they have to deal with this. I'll just chant and the problem will go away. Well, okay. Chanting is fine, but you're chanting, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. How dare he do that? Hare Krishna. How dare he do that? Krishna, Krishna. How dare? Hare Hare. So you're not chanting at that time actually. So there are, just as physical wounds may need to be physically healed, apart from chanting, sometimes emotional wounds also need emotional healing. So if I have been hurt by someone terribly, at that time, I may need a sympathetic ear to hear. And that person understands me, empathizes with me, comforts me. And then I chant, I can take care of chanting. Now, if there is no one, I may have a physical wound and say there is no physical help available. At that time, I may just say, just chant Krishna's name, then I try to transcend. Okay, this wound is there, I can't do anything, so I just chant Krishna and transcend it. Try to transcend it. It's possible. Similarly, some emotional wounds are there, there is no solution available, we may transcend it. We just try to take shelter of Krishna. But we have to see what works. Phalena parichayati. The consciousness has to move towards Krishna. So if there is a severe physical wound which is stopping me from moving towards Krishna, my consciousness to move towards Krishna, then address that physical issue and then move to consciousness towards Krishna. Say like somebody has a lot of backache, back pain, and they sit on the floor and they're sitting on the floor and chanting. Well, they're just thinking of the pain, they're not thinking of Krishna. Well, sit on a chair, sit on a cushion, and then chant. So it's not that we have to consider the physical or the mental as something that has to be rejected or neglected in order to connect with Krishna. As long as we have the body and the body and the mind also have needs that need to be addressed. So the holy name is the ultimate cure. And it cures when our consciousness connects with the holy name. And if there is a physical or a mental obstacle which is preventing us from connecting, then the physical and mental obstacle needs to be addressed. And once we address it, then the connection becomes stronger. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
So thank you very much. Shila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhaktavinda ki, Gaur Premanande.
Hare Krishna, thank you. Let's thank Prabhuji again for a wonderful class. So nice to see all of you also come on a weekday evening after a long day, and also especially the children here to see